Welcome to the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation. My name is Jason James. I'm the Director General of the Foundation. I'm just going to introduce today our chairman for tonight's discussion, which I think promises to be an unusually interesting one, and then I'll leave it to him to introduce the other two speakers. And our chairman is somebody, a bit of an insider for the Foundation, because he's actually the chairman of the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation. There's Sir Peter Williams sitting in the middle here. And as well as being chairman of this foundation, he's also chairman of the National Physical Laboratory. And he was previously chairman and chief executive of Oxford Instruments. He was also previously the treasurer and vice president of the Royal Society, as well as an awful lot of other things. I don't know how many of these I should really mention, but Chancellor of the University of Leicester, Master of St Catherine's College, Oxford, chairman of the trustees of the Science Museum, and chairman of the Engineering and Technology Board. So you're well qualified to chair tonight's meeting. And I think I'll leave it to that and leave it to you to introduce the other two speakers, Peter.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Can I add my warm welcome to what Jason just said? I think he's entirely wrong in what he just said, however, because when it comes to a humble physicist like myself confronting multisensory internet communication and virtual love, I must say I feel wholly inadequate. Many of you may have been here, Jason tells me it's nearly a year ago now, to an equally intriguing presentation on Hatsune Miku, which is a virtual Vocaloid pop star, which is extremely popular in Japan. And at the time I was skeptical of the idea that people would pay real money to attend a theatre to watch a Vocaloid actually performing on stage. I think those doubts were probably reinforced when all my travels, I tend to sort of spend a lot of time at 35,000 feet, rummaging through films that are worth watching. And I watched a few weeks ago Robot and Frank. Now, I don't know whether anybody of you have seen that film. This is a film about a wonderful robot, a humanoid sort of robot, and he and this chap Frank rob a bank. Now, the intriguing thing about the film was the relationship between the robot and the human being. And I think we're going to hear much about such matters this evening from two very distinguished speakers who know each other very well, by the way, but lest that this becomes too friendly without any atmosphere of constructive contention. This is where you, our guests on the floor, come in, because after we've heard these two fascinating presentations, it's your turn to ask whatever questions you wish, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Our first speaker is Professor Adrian Chuk, who is Professor of Pervasive Computing at City University London. He's been active in the National University of Singapore, in Keio University in Japan, and also in Mitsubishi Electric. And he was, but he tells me, has almost ceased being a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. He still looks like he should be a young global leader to me. So, Adrian, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. And in Japan, we actually don't get the chance to actually call people really sir, so thank you, sir. And thank you to everyone at the Daiwa Foundation and Ogawa-san. It's been very kind to invite us here tonight to speak here. I know myself and I know David as well. He told me we're very excited to be here. So we're going to talk tonight about two interrelated topics, which is multisensory communication and virtual love. And the connection, I think, is, as we'll try to explain, is that we're developing a new way of sensing with computers, which involves all of our body senses. And then this will lead on to a new kind of computers and robots, which naturally leads on to the sense of affection and love we feel. So let me start off by saying I think that one of the motivation for our research is that I think we should be like the samurai of the days gone by. You know the famous story of the samurai who could fight even when he was totally blind, and he could perceive the world with all of his senses. And so I think we should also have such interaction with computers. But if you think about it now, most of the interaction we have with computers is with glass. Everything is behind the screen, and even if you're using the latest devices like iPad and iPod, you're still basically touching glass. And it's as if in the real world we were looking out the window, but we can never open up the window. We're just looking through the window. So we need to change the way we perceive the virtual world beyond glass. And related science also has shown that more than half of human communication is in fact non-verbal. So we're missing out a lot of communication if we're only interacting through audio-visual text and through the glass. And that's why it still doesn't feel the same if you talk to someone through Skype rather than having a dinner with them together or going to see a movie together, doing something physical. So I believe in the future that we will have a new kind of internet. Not only can we communicate the data and information that we're living in today, we have the age of information, but in the future we'll move to the age of experience communication. So you can not only communicate, for example, on my GPS location, I'm next to the Hyde Park and it's 4 degrees, but what does it really feel like to be here and have the drinks together after in the physical world? How can we share that experience? So I'll talk a little bit about the earlier research I did, which led on to the multi-sense communication research. I started off about 15 years ago as a young assistant professor in Singapore, and I actually, to tell you the truth, I got a very large grant from the military. It was the Singapore Defence Science Agency, and the project was to do augmented reality for soldier in the urban combat, so they can see information in their view about where they are, what are the objects. Because if you take time to look down the map, you can get shot. So I don't have time to do that. And when I was doing that project, I thought, how could this be affected the society? And I thought this can lead on to new kinds of communication and new kinds of entertainment. So I developed a system called Human Pac-Man. And when I was a little kid, I used to really enjoy playing Pac-Man as a little boy. And I thought, now with augmented reality and with wearable computers and head-mount display, we can become the human Pac-Man. We can become the Pac-Man, and we're playing the game in the physical world. We're taking it outside of the screen. So in the augmented reality, we can see the cookies and we can physically walk through them as if we're the Pac-Man. So I'll show you a quick video of this now.
A wearable computer with a head-mounted display and various sensors which we have, which is sensing my body's position and as well as the head orientation. So we know exactly where I am and what I'm looking at. So when we do this, we can then augment the real world which I am in now with the virtual world. So this Pac-Man world, I'm seeing it as part of the real world. I can see cookies in front of me and I'm walking through them as if I'm the human Pac-Man.
Okay, so now we can do that even with the commercial products, because that was like a very heavy, about 3 kilos on my back. Now we can do that with a mobile phone and with apps. You can play augmented reality games already, and these are becoming commercial devices. And next I want to talk about sound. Sound is another sense, and we tend to not think much about sound when we're thinking about computer interfaces. It's kind of like old news. But if you think about it, sound was the first kind of augmented reality. Before the Sony Walkman, we didn't actually have the opportunity to have our own personal sound. But now, everyone can have their own augmented sound anywhere. And sound is still very, very important for new kinds of interfaces, new kinds of interaction, if you make the sound interactive. And I want to give an example of one of our former students at Keio University. And what he did is he used sound with an umbrella. And in Japan in the summer, for those of you who've been to Japan, it rains a lot. It's like England but hot. And you have to carry an umbrella around because it's going to rain. But what do you do with an umbrella when it's not raining? It's a little bit boring to carry around. So what he did is he turned the umbrella into a new interactive object, like a samurai sword. Let's have a look at this video. fast. And when it's cold like it is in London, you can combine with this system here called Fula. Okay, so you can see sound is still very important for new kinds of interaction and entertainment. Now I want to talk about the other senses, which is touch, taste and smell. Touch is actually one of the most important senses. In fact, there's been studies which have shown that probably touch is not a desire, but it's a need. It's a need of humans. So there was a famous study done with rhesus monkeys, infant monkeys, and they put them in a cage, and on one side there was a fake mother monkey which had fur, and another side had a fake mother monkey with no fur, but with the milk. And the infant monkey would choose the fake mother with fur almost to the point of death. So it was almost like the need to be touched was more than the desire to eat. Now, of course, we can't do such studies for humans because it'd be unethical, but when the Iron Curtain fell down and there were studies done in orphanages in the Eastern Bloc countries, and the death rate was really high, very high. And the conclusion was it was not due to nutrition, because they had enough nutrition, because there was no staff to hold the babies, and so they had a very high death rate. So I believe that touch is very important. It's a basic sense, and it's a need, but it's missing from today's internet. So a few years ago I wanted to see, can we convey touch through internet? And I thought a first example I wanted to do was with pets, because when you're away from the home, you still can't telephone your pet and have a conversation, because we can't talk to animals yet, unfortunately. But what you can do is you can hug your pet. So this system here, you could hug a doll, which is a physical avatar, and then your pet, in this case it's a pet chicken, would feel hugging on her body. And I extended this system to human communication. So this was a system called Hugging Pajama for parents and children, when parents are very busy and working hard or on business trips. And not only could they call their children, but they can also hug together with this Hugging Pajama. And I'll show you a quick video of this now.
And transmits his virtual hug via the internet.
And then you can see that this Hugging Pajama is connected to the internet, produces the hug in the same spot. We can both wear such jackets, and then interactively we can have a hugging and caressing together through the internet. Okay, so that was a little bit clunky, because that was in my lab in Keio University back in Tokyo. But since then, one of my PhD students who's graduated actually made a company from this. And he's making these devices which you can buy online. And they're robust, you can wash them. And it's designed actually for autistic children. Because autistic children have panic attacks, and when they are squeezed, they reduce their panic. So when the parent is at work or away from the home, they have this mobile app, and they can monitor the health of their child, for example, heart rate, etc. And if their child is having a panic attack, they can send them a virtual squeeze, and then you can monitor how many hugs you gave your child in the day and other features. But that's I still think that in today's world, wearing hugging vests is still something that the general public doesn't really want to do. So we're trying to now make devices which are very small. So for example, the size of rings. Rings and watches and bracelets are the kind of thing that we feel very comfortable to wear. So this device is an interactive ring, and you can squeeze the ring and your friend or your partner can feel the squeeze on their finger anywhere in the world because the rings connect to the internet. And so the idea is that you can simulate the sensation of holding hands together. Sorry, the video's not playing, but anyway. So this is the new design of the ring that we're working on. We're planning to release it early next year. A very small ring, and it has this remote squeezing through the internet. And it will have an app where you can connect to your friends on Facebook and Twitter and send group hugs to all your friends through the internet. Now, what about things like kissing? Kissing is something that is a very haptic sensation. I don't think you want to kiss someone through your mobile phone, through glass. So this is a good example where haptic sensation is very, very important. So we made a prototype device which has sensing of the pressure from a person's lips, and it's a bidirectional control system and outputs the same pressure on your partner's lips. But it's bidirectional, so you both have the effect of kissing each other. And I'll show you a quick video of this here. Okay. So basically, this device connects to your computer through the internet. And when you want to kiss your partner, you hold the device to your lips, and it measures the pressure. And as I said, it has a bidirectional control system, so it out modulates the pressure to give a realistic kiss sensation. Now we're working on a new version of this, which is going to be very small, and so you can attach it to your mobile phone. So not only can you, with this device, you'll be able to see your partner through the video, and then this device will also have a pressure sensing and tongue movement sensor on this mobile device. And now I want to show you a work which is not my work. It's a work of a very good friend of mine in Japan, Professor Hiroshi Ishiguro from Osaka University. And I want to show you this because I believe it shows a very good link about why when you make touch interfaces like what I've just shown you, it is not just about reproducing the effect of touch, which is effectively some kind of force or vibration or friction. What he's shown actually is that just by adding touch to communication, you change the emotion. You change the emotion of the communication. And he's done a survey. He's done experiments with this device called HugV, where he's comparing communication through mobile phone and the same communication through mobile phone, but with this hugging device, and it increased the emotional presence of the partners, and even increased the feeling of affection between partners. So the very important thing is that touch is not just about the raw information, but it can also modulate your emotion in a positive way. Let's have a quick look at this Hiroshi Ishiguro's video.
The HugV is a cushion in a minimalistic human form. It contains a pocket into which you can put your mobile phone, transforming it into a physical communication medium. The shape of this huggable cushion is based on the Talanoid robot developed by Osaka University's Professor Ishiguro. It contains a microcontroller and vibrators which match the characteristics of the caller's voice, so people can have a richer communication experience when talking on the phone with loved ones.
2つのバイブレーターでドックンドックンっていうその心臓の一番ベースの鼓動の音を作っています。でその鼓動が今度は速くなったり強くなったりするわけですけど、それは、人が話す声の大きさとか声の高さに応じて、速くしたり強くしたり、そういうふうな、いくつかのルールで鼓動を再現するようにしてるんですよ。テレノイドをお年寄りにこう渡した時にほとんどの人がこうやって抱っこして相手と喋られてたんですね。 だから、低用度いろんな機能ついてますけど、一番簡単にするんだったらなんか携帯電話と抱ける柔らかい人間らしい形のものっていうのでいいだろうっていうので、やっぱお年寄りと子供さんとかで、それからもちろんこれは親子でもいいですし、恋人同士でも使えると思います。
So now I want to finish off by talking about smell and taste. Now, smell and taste are the two senses which are very rarely used when we're interfacing with computers. But actually, smell and taste is very important because it's the two senses which directly connect to the limbic system of our brain, which is responsible for emotions and memory. So smell and taste can subconsciously affect your mood and also trigger memory. So it's very important if we can communicate by smell and taste through computers. But the problem is that computers now are very difficult to connect with smell and taste because of the fact that it's chemical-based and analog. It's very difficult to transmit chemicals through the internet. It's a bit like sound was before we had digital files like MP3. You had to give someone a tape to give someone a song. And so we have a very difficult problem with scaling smell and taste communication now. But in the 60s, there was some very early works. This, I think, was one of the world's first works on smell communication. It was called Sensorama. And not only was it 3D motion picture, but it also had aromas. And we've been doing research with my students on different kinds of smell and taste communication. This is an example one of my PhD students did these glasses, and it detected the preference of your partner through social networks, and then would emit that smell to try to affect their mood in a positive way when you're having a conversation. And we've also been working with a friend of mine in Japan who's an entrepreneur and developing a mobile device which can transmit smell. And so this device is called ChatPerf, and it basically allows you to not only send text messages through internet, but also send smell. And I want to show you a short video of this system now.
Food is inseparable from the history of mankind. And now, 2013, introducing a whole new approach to food, tasting and savoring food with your nose. How to 1. Choose. 2. Insert. 3. Smell. 4. Eat. And that's all there is to it. So, are we ready to savor this? Let's say you're a student with no money. All you need is some white rice and your stomach will feel satisfied. Let's say you're a woman on a diet. Obviously, calories are not an issue when you're dining at Hana Yakiniku. Now, let's say there's a couple going out on a date.
So you can put your devices together to make new kinds of smell. That's very good for interpersonal communication, like on dating.
We're pretty sure this will help bring them closer.
Okay, that's very Japanese kind of dating. Very polite. Now, of course, this works on the mobile phone, but because it's an audience, I'll show you the demo of this system and on the big screen, so it works on iPad too. So basically, this has an app called Senti, and excuse me, it's gone to Facebook. And so basically, this is just a demonstration. So when someone sends you a message, the device will turn on and strawberries. Up with a lovely smell. Actually, it's the muscat grape from Japan. So but you can have almost any kind of smell coming from this device. Actually, tomorrow morning I'm flying to Spain. My students and I are presenting at a competition for El Bulli. It's a famous restaurant in Spain, and they have a competition for new food, taste and smell media. So we're proposing these kind of technologies. For example, in internet you can have new kinds of tele-media, tele-shopping. Not only see a recipe, but smell and taste it. And so, famous chef, whenever you buy those cookbooks for Jamie Oliver and Ferran Andrew, you can. It's very difficult to actually make it, but with these technologies, you can not only follow the recipe, but see, taste, and smell, and much easier to. For example, your grandmother could do modernist cuisine. But another thing is, I think this will lead to new kinds of creation. Because just like music, before if you wanted to play music, you had to learn how to play an instrument, a violin or guitar, piano, and it was very difficult. There's a lot of hours you have to do to learn to play music. But now, of course, now that music is digital, we have completely new ways of music creation. As you know, young kids can compose with these kind of software, just basically using graphical techniques to make their own music. So similarly, you can imagine in the future new kinds of taste and smell composition, which is purely digital, because you can output digital, you can also input digital. So for example, kids, without having to know how to cook, could make completely new kind of recipes. And those recipes could be time varying, so going from sweet to bitter in 1 second or something. Now, I did mention that the problem with smell and taste communication is the analog. The problem is the chemicals. How do we transmit chemicals? This device needs like an inkjet printer cartridge, kind of, to transmit the chemical. So what I'm doing in my lab now is working on purely non-chemical transmission of taste and smell. So this first device is aimed at putting electrical taste. This is a concept. But this next device is real. So we've developed a device in the lab which electrically stimulates your taste receptors on your tongue, and this produces the virtual taste sensation in your brain. This is without chemicals. And once we can do this kind of electrical communication, of course, then it's completely scalable on the internet, because you don't need to transmit chemicals, and someone can just program taste with software. Now in the future, we also want to make smell communication without chemicals. But the problem is, for anyone here who comes from biomedical background, the olfactory bulb is actually behind your nasal cavity. So it's not actually in your nose. So it's very painful for us to put electrodes there. So we're not going to try that. But I have another idea, and I'm working with a collaborator in France, a neuroscientist, is to use external magnetic stimulation. So pulsed magnetic fields produce electrical current. So you can remotely produce the electrical currents in your olfactory bulb. And we propose to put a device under the palatine bone, which is in the back of your mouth, like a dental guard, and that will magnetically stimulate your olfactory senses. So now, on that note, I'd like to transfer is that the word? to Dr. David Levy, who'll continue this. How can all these senses be used for producing affection and love?
Thank you, Adrian. I'm quite sure Adrian has stimulated a lot of questions for later. Our next speaker has the perhaps invidious task of following that but I'm sure that David Levy is well up to it. He's president of the International Computer Games Association. I'm sure I don't need to remind you of the importance to both the British economy and the Japanese economy of computer games in general. He has his own company, London-based company, Intelligent Toys Limited, but he also has a deeper, darker past. He is an international chess master. So don't take him on at chess later this evening, any of you. And indeed, amongst his many publications, a recent book is entitled Love and Sex with Robots. So without more ado, David Levy, over to you, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Daiwa, for inviting me here. I'd like to invite you for the next 20 minutes to join me in an exploration of the limits of artificial intelligence. What will it mean for society when artificial intelligence researchers succeed in creating sophisticated artificial personalities, artificial emotions, artificial consciousness, and when robots are also endowed with the ability to recognize what we say and what we mean, and to carry on interesting, amusing, intelligent, and friendly, even loving conversations with us? How will society react to this new breed of person? How will people react to robots that say, "I love you," and mean it? These are some of the questions that have fascinated me for the past few years while I've been researching about the possibility of love, sex, and marriage with robots. Before I start us on this journey, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes telling you how it was I became interested in this field. I was researching a book which was a kind of primer on AI, and during the course of my research I came across a book that had been written and published in 1984 by an MIT professor called Sherry Turkle, and she had done some research on how society was likely to be changed by the advent of computers and the proliferation of computers. And during the course of her research, Professor Turkle interviewed a lot of people at MIT, and she spoke to people who were computer users. And one of the questions she asked them was how they felt about computers. And one of the subjects that she interviewed was a student called Anthony. And Anthony said the following, and this quotation had a huge impact on me. He said, "I've tried having girlfriends, but I prefer my relationship with my computer." And the reason that Anthony preferred his relationship with his computer was that he felt that society cannot be relied upon because one doesn't know how society is going to react to one. You don't know when you go on a date with someone how they're going to react to you. But when you sit down with your computer, you always know how it's going to react. And that was Anthony's attitude. And I read this book for the first time in 2004, 20 years after it was published. And I thought, if in 1984 there can be people, intelligent people, MIT students, who feel like that, I wonder what's happened in the intervening 20 years. I wonder how much society has moved on in this direction. And so I started to research the field. Very quickly I had a huge collection of articles, papers from conferences, chapters from books, and I decided to write Love and Sex with Robots. So let us now begin our voyage of exploration and discovery in the realm of relationships, just as I began it when I started my research, looking at the question, why do we fall in love? I discovered from the research psychology literature that of 10 or so major reasons why we humans fall in love with other humans, most of them have parallels when we come to consider the possibility of a human falling in love with a robot. One of the major reasons that have been identified by research psychologists as contributing to the falling in love process between humans is known as reciprocal liking. That means that Peter is much more likely to fall in love with Mary if Peter knows at the outset that Mary likes or loves him. But a robot can be programmed to make you think that it likes or loves you. So already we can see that this key reason for falling in love is something that's fairly easy to simulate in a robot. Another of the major reasons for liking and falling in love is similarity. Two people are much more likely to fall in love if they are similar in some way in their background, in their religious beliefs, in their hobbies, etc. So if a user of a robot is keen on Beethoven, and a robot is programmed to know everything about Beethoven's music, what a wonderful conversation they can have. Immediately, the robot becomes attractive as a conversation partner for the human. Yet another reason for falling in love is being alone with the object of one's desire. In the case of a robot, that's very easy to achieve. You simply buy one in the shop and take it home with you. And so it goes on. During the course of my research, I identified 10 major reasons that appear in the psychology literature as to why people fall in love, and almost all of them have a parallel in the possibility of relationships between humans and robots in the future. Let's now move on to the subject of sex, and particularly to the question, what motivates us to have sex and why do we enjoy sex? And here too we can observe some interesting parallels by studying the literature from research psychology. It turns out that the most significant motivations identified by research psychologists for having sex, and the main reasons why we enjoy it, have their own parallels when we come to consider the possibility that in the future people will be having sex with robots. So far as sexual motivations are concerned, an interesting perspective can be cast on the subject by examining the reasons most frequently given by the clients of prostitutes as to why they pay for sex, what they get out of the experience. One reason often cited is a desire for variety, both a desire for a variety of the sexual partner and a desire for variety of the experiences that the partner can deliver. Another is a wish for a sexual encounter that doesn't involve the client in any longer-term obligation to enter into a relationship. But consider this, both of these motivations can be satisfied by sex with robots. Robots that can be manufactured to be beautiful or handsome, of any size and physical characteristics, designed with the capabilities of delivering any type of sexual experience that's in any of the sex manuals that have been written, and programmed to avoid making any demands for gifts, expensive dinners, exotic holidays, or long-term commitments. As to the parallels between the joy of sex between humans and the pleasures to be had from sex with robots, the clearest parallel is the pure physical pleasure of orgasm. There are corporations in Japan, in the USA, and in Europe that manufacture realistic-looking sex dolls, selling for prices that range from about $5,000 up to about $10,000 or even more. These are dolls made from silicone or other artificial materials that have no moving parts or other robotic components, yet apparently they can deliver sufficient sexual satisfaction to their high-price paying customers to convince the customers that the products are worth buying. Now, as we know, robots can already climb stairs, they can play the trumpet, they can conduct symphony orchestras, and they can move in other human-like ways. When robots appear on the market that move like a human in bed, gasp and moan like a human, and behave in other human-like ways during sex, what will be the effect of these robots on the humans who try them out? And how will they affect society's attitudes to sex? What kind of sexual animals will we become as a result? Now, looking around, I can see some of you looking at me in disbelief. Sex with robots? What a ridiculous idea. Okay, let's go back 100 years. Was the idea of same-sex marriage not a ridiculous idea 100 years ago? Wasn't oral sex strongly disapproved of just about everywhere? Wasn't masturbation known to be physically and psychologically damaging to the point that the medical profession was almost totally against the practice? But today all of these attitudes have been turned on their heads. Same-sex unions have been legalized. Oral sex is almost de rigueur in most sexual relationships between humans. And in 1972, the American Medical Association pronounced masturbation to be perfectly normal and healthy. So we can see how much sexual attitudes have changed with time, and how much more, one asks, will they change in the coming decades? Will significant numbers of people be falling in love with robots, having sex with robots, and even marrying them? In my book, I forecast that the first human-robot marriages will take place around 2050, most likely in the state of Massachusetts. It's a free-thinking state, very liberal thinking. There's a lot of robotics research going on there. If I were you, I'd rush out and put my money on Massachusetts for the first robot marriages. Now let's explore some trends in the development of society's ideas about relationships and consider where these trends are leading with respect to human-robot relationships. This topic has now become a serious academic subject. There have been international conferences on human-robot personal relationships, and next April, Adrian and I are chairing a symposium in London on love and sex with robots at the 50th anniversary conference of the UK Society for Artificial Intelligence and Simulation of Behaviour. And this is one of the trends. The concept of human-robot relationships is increasingly being investigated by researchers from various disciplines. If you get involved in discussing the idea of human-robot relationships, you'll quite likely find a number of people making the argument, if it isn't human, how can you love it? To help us satisfy any such skeptics, let us consider the love that many people exhibit for their pet animals and for their virtual pets. Some pet owners derive even more satisfaction from their pet relationships than they do from their social relationships with people. Love for a pet is often very strong, sometimes even stronger than a person's love for other humans, and can be manifested in various ways. The offer of a reward for a missing animal, an owner bequeathing an extraordinarily large sum of money for the care of their pet, even making the pet a millionaire. Spending considerable amounts of money on pet food, healthcare, and sometimes on their animals' grooming and clothing. And many pet owners interact with their pets in ways redolent of human-human relationships, giving them names, feeding them from their own plates at meal times, celebrating their birthdays, allowing them to sleep on the owner's beds, which I do with my cats, talking to them and considering them as members of the family. And when a pet dies, the intensity of the owner's feeling of grief will often be very similar to those experienced with the bereavement of spouse or partner. In fact, in a survey conducted in Chicago Park about 20 years ago, more women aged 70 and over would miss losing their dog than would miss losing their husband. Sometimes an owner's love for their pet is seen in bizarre news reports. A bridegroom designated his dog as best man. Divorcing couples have battled in the courts over the custody of their pet. And there's a website, www.marryyourpet.com, that offers, for a suitable fee of course, owners the opportunity to marry their pets, and you get a nice certificate put on the wall. Wouldn't you agree that all of these manifestations of love are also appropriate ways to treat human loved ones? So let's transfer the focus of our attention from pet animals to virtual pets, such as the hugely popular Japanese invention, the Tamagotchi. A virtual pet is usually driven by a computer chip that's been programmed to exhibit a few virtual needs, a few virtual emotions, and some elements of a virtual personality. Being driven by a computer chip means that a virtual pet is in essence a computer in different clothing, just as a robot is a computer in different clothing. That we humans have evolved from a race that has the capacity to love our pet animals to a race that similarly has the capacity to form very strong emotional attachments to Tamagotchis, to another Japanese invention, the Aibo robotic dog, and to other virtual pets, is surely indicative of the way that the human propensity for loving is developing, from pet animals to virtual pets, and then to sophisticated robots, which after all will just be a technologically more advanced form of virtual pet. Why should we doubt that this development will take place? Why should the human race not extend yet again its horizons for to whom and on what we bestow our affections? One effect of the Tamagotchi craze in the late 1990s and of the similar Aibo phenomenon was to spawn a culture in which some electronic products are accepted as having lifelike properties. The MIT professor I mentioned earlier, Sherry Turkle, explains that as a result of this change in perception as to the aliveness felt by some people towards artifacts, quote, people are learning to interact with computers through conversation and gesture. People are learning that to relate successfully to a computer, you have to assess its emotional state. You take the machine at interface value, much as you would another person, end quote. Will it be any different with robots? Will we not treat sophisticated robots with all their artificial personality, artificial emotion, artificial consciousness and great conversational skills, much as we do other people? I invite you to think about this question and we can discuss it over our drinks after this session is over. Before the skeptics amongst you decide that emotional relationships with robots are very unlikely to appeal, Please consider the following situation. From the other end of an internet chat line comes the image of a virtual friend. You hear the seductive tones of its voice. You smell, with Adrian's technology, its artificial bodily scent, and it is endowed with all of the artificially intelligent characteristics that will be known to AI researchers 2 or 3 decades from now. You sit at home looking at this image, talking to it and savouring its fragrance. Its looks, its voice and its personality appeal to you, and you find its conversation stimulating, entertaining and loving. Might you fall in love with this companion? Of course you might. Why shouldn't you? Pen-friend relationships long ago, even before the telephone, established that people can fall in love without being able to see or hear the object of their love. So it is clear that being able to see it, finding its looks to your liking, being able to hear its sexy voice, and being physically attracted by its simulated body fragrance can only strengthen the love that you might develop in the absence of sight, sound and smell. I hope that this brief exploration has opened your minds to the possibilities of such relationships. And if you ask yourself why anyone would want to have a loving and intimate relationship with a robot, stop for a moment to think about all those millions of people in this world who are lonely, who have no one to love and no one who loves them. People for whom rewarding, loving and sexual relationships are only a dream. Think about the great voids in their lives that could be filled by a loving robot. For those people, the key question will not be, is it not better to have a relationship with a human than one with a robot? For these people, the key question will be, is it not better to have a relationship with a robot than no relationship at all? Thank you.